I didn't hear the clink of cups or the low murmur of travelers until after the sentence left his mouth. "Our flight isn't today anymore," Caleb said, stirring his espresso as if nothing in the world could touch him. Morning light swept across the hotel cafe in Florence, warming the marble floor and doing nothing for the chill that ran down my spine. "My name is Elena Brooks. I'm 29, 3 years married, and this was supposed to be the trip that steadied the parts of our marriage that had started to wobble. Since when, I asked, already reaching for my phone. The itinerary, the confirmations, the safety of seeing facts lined up where emotion couldn't smudge them. Caleb's hand slid over my wrist, gentle but firm. "Relax. I moved us to tomorrow. Gives us more time to wander without rushing to the airport." His smile was the kind I used to fall for easy practice, just enough warmth to pass a casual inspection. Up close it was colder. "I just want the details on my phone," I said. "Send me the new confirmation." His expression cooled a degree. "You don't have to manage every minute, Elena. We're in Italy. Try being present." The word manage scraped across me like sandpaper. I was organized, not controlling, careful, not paranoid. But lately with Caleb, my ordinary caution kept being rebranded as a flaw. "You're right," I replied, hating how small my voice sounded. "I'll try." "That's my girl." He kissed my knuckles, then checked his buzzing phone twice in quick succession before pocketing it. "I have a couple of errands, see a gallery, take pictures for your mom. I'll catch up." Errands. On an anniversary morning in Florence. His phone chimed again, screen turned away from me like a secret. I did as ordered, half out of habit, half because the Uffizi felt like neutral ground, where paintings could absorb nerves the way cathedrals swallow echoes. The Botticellis were as luminous as the guidebooks promised. Still, I checked my phone more than I looked at the frames. Noon passed. 1, 2. No message. No be there soon. When I finally went back to the hotel, I found Caleb zipping his suitcase with a brisk competence I rarely saw when we traveled. He was the one who left cables tangled and shirts balled like lost thoughts at the bottom of a bag. Today, everything folded into straight edges. "What's going on?" I asked. "Change of plans." He didn't look up. "I have to head to the airport earlier than expected." Earlier, as in, "Today, work thing," he said. "Casual, too casual. They need me in Phoenix tomorrow morning." "Total mess. Your flight's still tomorrow. There was a mix-up when I shifted things. I tried to get us on the same plane. Full flight." The explanation arrived pre-polished, like he'd practiced it in the elevator. "What kind of mix-up?" I pressed. "We can call the airline together." "I already tried," he said, the word clicking like a lock. "It's one night, Elena. Florence is one of the safest cities you'll ever be in. Treat it like a mini solo day. You'll be fine." Something mocking curled under fine. I'd seen this shape before, Caleb recasting my concern as clinginess, my questions as nagging. A quarrel now would mean a fight I didn't want in a hotel hallway. I swallowed the taste of it. "If you have to go, go," I said. His relief was immediate, a brightening, a tell that he'd gotten away with something. "You'll thank me when you're posting sunset shots from Piazzale Michelangelo." "Promise." He pecked my cheek, shouldered his bag, and was gone, leaving the room neat and strangely airless. I watched the door a full minute after it closed, the way you watch a stage once the actors disappear, hearing the last of the lines bouncing in the rafters. Then I moved. Shower. Dinner alone in a trattoria where the waiter called me signorina and brought me an extra biscotti, as if single women deserved consolation by default. I lay awake afterward, the ceiling fan counting off seconds I couldn't corral. At dawn, my phone pulsed with messages, each one dropping like a coin in a jar. "Made it back to Phoenix. You were such a champ about the work thing. Hotel coffee here is tragic. You spoiled me with the cafe downstairs. Hope you slept. Text me your plan for the day." Then one stamp 2 hours later, also, "You should have seen your face yesterday. Priceless." I stared at that last line long enough for the letters to turn abstract. Priceless, as in hilarious, as in a punchline I hadn't realized I'd set up. The phone rang. Caleb across the top of the screen like a headline. I answered. "Morning," he said, bright as the Arizona sun. "Did you read my messages?" "I can't." "With that look you gave me at the airport, I've been laughing about it. Laughing about what I asked, careful, as if the truth were a glass I might drop." The prank, he said, and I could picture the shrug. "Don't tell me you haven't figured it out." There was no real emergency. I wanted to see if you could handle things without me for once. You're always, attached to your plans. Consider it exposure therapy." The room tilted just slightly. The wardrobe leaned and righted itself. "You left me behind," I said. "As a joke." "Come on," he chuckled. "It was clever. I even shuffled the flights just to pull it off." "You worry so much, babe. This will be good for you." Independence adventure. You'll go home tomorrow and say thank you for the confidence boost. I pressed the phone to my ear and heard his breath easy as pool water. The sound of someone floating while someone else treads. The details he kept vague yesterday sharpened in the light of his confession, his secrecy with the phone, the rehearsed lines about the full flight, the relief when I didn't push back. "Caleb," I said, and my voice was level in a way that surprised me because inside everything was not. "You stranded me. You're being dramatic." He laughed again, softer now, like he was trying to coax a skittish dog. "It's Florence, not the wilderness. You love lists. Make one for your day. Take yourself on a date. We'll laugh about this next week." There were a dozen things I could have said, and none of them would have mattered to a man who believed the word therapy could be stapled to cruelty to render it noble. The light at the window moved, slipping off the dresser, pooling on the floor. Outside, a scooter coughed to life and darted past as if the city had places to be. I had places to be too, just not the ones he'd assigned me. "I have to go," I said and hung up. The silence that followed was not empty. It was stacked with decisions. I turned the phone to airplane mode, set it on the desk, and sat there long enough to feel my pulse stop galloping. Then I stood, pulled my hair into a knot, and opened the laptop the hotel kept in the business alcove off the lobby. Whatever he had changed, whatever he had done in the name of entertainment, I would find out. The keyboard was slightly sticky from too many hands. The browser's homepage was a cheerful montage of rivers and terracotta roofs. I typed in my email and watched the inbox load. It would take only a few clicks to surface the truth. The cursor blinked steady as a metronome. I inhaled, clicked, and began. The hotel's business alcove was a nook of quiet machines and wilting plants. A printer blinked out of paper. Somewhere behind the concierge desk, cutlery chimed. I logged into my email, fingers steady, in a way the rest of me was not. There it was, thread after thread from the airline unread, because Caleb had switched our contact preferences to his number weeks ago. One subject line snagged my eye: cancellation confirmation passenger request. My name sat next to it like a dare. I clicked. The words were clinical. "We confirm cancellation of your return segment at the passenger's request. No residual value remains on the ticket due to fare rules." Beneath that, a timestamp from 3 days ago while we were eating gelato, and he was making fun of the way I studied the bus map as if it were a solemn text. There was no corresponding email creating a new reservation for me. His own itinerary had changed. Mine had been erased. The floor did a trick where it felt both too close and too far. I set my palms on the desk until the illusion passed. "Signorina, are you all right?" The concierge had drifted closer without me hearing her approach. She was composed in the way of people who have wrangled late checkouts and sobbing honeymooners for a lifetime. Her name tag read Benedetti. "I think my husband canceled my flight home," I said. The sentence sounded absurd in the air, like I'd confused the words. "Come," she said gently. "Use the lobby phone. We will call the airline together." She guided me to the marble counter, dialed for me, and placed the receiver in my hand. The hold music was cheerful and manic. The agent who finally answered was careful and scripted. I gave them the confirmation code, my full name, my date of birth, the number of times I had swallowed in the last minute. "Yes," the agent said, voice bright. "I see a cancellation on the second passenger's return initiated by the primary contact on the record. Can you tell me who the primary contact is?" "Caleb Brooks," she said, like reciting a line from a play. He confirmed the security answers. The request was documented as passenger initiated. "But I am the passenger. I understand, Ms. Brooks," she said, voice softening a notch. "Because Mr. Brooks is listed as the booking owner, and the contact we processed the change per his authorization. I'm sorry. Is there any way to undo that, to reissue the original fare?" A pause. Fingertips tapping keys I could not see. "The fare class you had is closed. A new ticket tomorrow morning would be." She named a number that could pay a month's rent back in Phoenix. "Prices are high with the holiday weekend. I can hold that fare for an hour." I did the math of our accounts without a calculator. Most of our liquid money lived in the joint account. Caleb handled the online logins like a benevolent gatekeeper, which I had labeled convenient because it kept the peace. My personal card had room, but not for that number without incurring interest I'd been raised to treat as shame. I thanked the agent, asked her to note the file, and ended the call before she could tell me again how sorry she was. "Sit, Signora Benedetti," said, ushering me to a wingback chair. She brought water without fuss, the way people in good restaurants refill your glass before you realize you're thirsty. "This is not a small problem." "No," I said, and to my surprise my voice didn't wobble. "It is not." "I have a friend," she said. "He helps travelers with messy situations. He knows the consulate. He speaks excellent English. Will you allow me to call him?" "Please." She phoned someone in rapid Italian. The vowels felt like wind chimes. When she returned, she had 2 small pastries balanced on a napkin and a plan. "Marco Rosi will come in 1 hour. He will look at your documents and make a list. Lists are comforting, no." I laughed once, embarrassed but grateful. Yes, they are. While I waited, I wrote my own. What I can control: my passport, my phone, the fact that I could book a room night by night, if the hotel had space, the choice not to answer Caleb's calls. What I can't is story back home, what he would tell people, what these next hours will cost me. Caleb called again anyway. The phone vibrated across the table like something alive. I flipped it face down. I drank water. I breathed. Marco arrived with the energy of someone stepping into a room he intends to make safe. Early 30s, linen shirt that had surrendered its battle with wrinkles, warm eyes that didn't scan my face for flaws. He shook my hand and introduced himself to me, and to the problem at the same time, as if we were all now in a working relationship. "May I see your passport?" he asked. "And any booking numbers you have." I handed over the notebook, where I'd written everything in neat squares, while Caleb teased me for treating travel like a group project. Marco didn't tease. He took a pen from behind his ear and added to my list. "This is what we'll do," he said. 1, note everything we know. 2, speak to the consulate. Not for a new passport. You have yours, but to understand emergency resources and loans in case payment is a barrier. 3, call the airline again and ask for the department that handles involuntary situations. Your case is not involuntary, he added quickly, but sometimes a supervisor with a heart will treat it as if it is. 4, we talk to your bank about temporary limits. 5, we make a plan for tonight and tomorrow so you don't have to decide everything at once. It was the first time that morning the future had felt like steps, not fog. "Why are you helping me?" I asked before I could stop the question. It sounded childish. "Because you are here," he said simply. "Because if the roles were reversed, I would want someone to do the same for my sister." He glanced at Benedetti. "Because Signora would throw me into the Arno if I refused." "True," Benedetti said deadpan, and we all smiled at the same time. We walked to the consulate under a sun that seemed less like a decoration and more like a factor. Marco set a pace meant for someone whose head had been dipped under water and had just come up. He narrated our route like a guide left at the newsstand right at the fountain with the bored pigeon, so the city shrank down to something that could fit inside my mind. Security was what security always is. Trays belts, the sense of performing innocence. We waited on plastic chairs with legs that didn't quite touch the floor. When it was my turn, the man behind the glass had a posture that suggested everything he had learned about the world confirmed his low expectations. "My husband canceled my flight home without telling me," I said. "I need to understand my options." The officer looked at my passport, then at me, then at Marco, whose presence seemed to upgrade me from person with a tail to person with an advocate. Marco switched to Italian for 30 seconds. Not a long speech more, a framing device, and I watched the officer's shoulders lose 1 centimeter of tension. "You are not in legal danger," the officer said in English now. "You have a valid passport. We cannot force an airline to reissue a ticket. We can, if needed, assist with a repatriation loan secured by the United States government to get you home. There are obligations with that, of course. We can also provide a letter for the airline documenting circumstances which might help." "Might?" Marco repeated with a small lift of his eyebrows. "Better than no." The officer printed a form and slid it to me, as if it were a warm plate he didn't want to drop. I filled out boxes: a name, address, employer, emergency contact. Picking an emergency contact felt like a small betrayal of the life Caleb and I had built, but I wrote my mother's name, her number, the city where she still sent me newspaper clippings about neighborhood cats. The officer stapled everything together with a motion so precise, it made me want to cry with relief and laugh at myself for the impulse. Next, he said, and we were technically speaking helped. Outside, Marco squinted up at the sky like he was taking its temperature. Lunch, he said. Decision-making runs on carbohydrates. He took me 3 blocks away to a place with paper placemats and a menu that seemed to have been typed on a typewriter and photocopied until the letters softened at the edges. The owner brought water then, without asking 2 plates of pasta and a small dish of green olives. Marco spoke to him in a tone I recognized from people who are on good terms with their luck. "You don't have to eat," he said to me, "but you must try." I took a bite to be polite and then kept going because the sauce was the exact geometry of salt and sweetness and tomatoes that had had a childhood. When I put down my fork, Marco was watching me with the kind of attention that didn't feel like surveillance. "Do you think I'm overreacting?" I asked. "Caleb says I'm dramatic." He considered this as if I'd asked him to estimate the weight of the building. "Being abandoned is big," he said. "Even if the city is beautiful, even if you are competent and strong. Big things deserve big reactions." "It wasn't an accident," I said. "He planned it. He told me he planned it like it was clever." "That is not clever," Marco said. "That is, what is the word? Petty." He wiped his fingers on his napkin. "You can be both practical now and philosophical later. Right now we book you a safe room for the next 2 nights, so you are not deciding everything every evening. Then we push the airline again. Tonight you rest. Tomorrow we try again." 2 nights, I repeated, and something inside me unclenched at a plan that extended past sunset. We returned to the hotel, where Benedetti produced an availability chart, like a magician pulling scarves from a sleeve. "We can extend your room through Wednesday. After that, we move you to a similar room on the 5th floor at the same rate." Yes, I said and signed like a person signing not for a room but for dignity. Upstairs, I allowed myself 10 minutes to open my messages. Caleb had sent a string of texts that read like a weather report turning bad. "How's your day?" slid into, "You're not answering," into, "This isn't funny if you're going to be like this," into, "Call me now." None of them asked if I was safe. None said I'm sorry. I put the phone down before the narrative pulled me into its current and met Marco in the lobby to call the airline again this time, asking for a supervisor. When the supervisor answered, a woman whose voice had spent time telling toddlers to share Marco introduced himself as a local travel consultant, assisting an American stranded by a marital dispute. The word made the supervisor inhale in the way of someone deciding whether to care. "Can you note the consulate involvement?" Marco asked, polite, but with the hydraulic pressure of someone who had made this call before. "And is there any way to honor her original fare on humanitarian grounds?" "There is no formal policy for humanitarian exceptions on voluntary cancellations," the supervisor said, "but I can apply an override code that waives the change fee and reduces the fare difference." "It's not nothing." She named a number. It was still a lot, but not the number that had made my throat lock. I gave her my personal card details. The payment went through. I felt something in my back muscles unclench a band that had been tuned too tight. "You'll receive the e-ticket within the hour," she said. "I'm sorry for your experience, Ms. Brooks." "Thank you," I said, because I had been taught that gratitude oils hinges that would otherwise squeal. After we hung up, Marco gave me a small, triumphant nod like a coach when the team executes the simple play perfectly. "Progress," he said. We celebrated, if you could call it that, by walking 2 blocks to a place that sold coffee so good, it felt like a small rebuke to the concept of settling. Marco taught me how to order the way locals did, without sounding like I was auditioning for a commercial. He pointed out small things I would have missed: a seamstress bent over a wedding dress in a workshop the size of a pantry, a child dragging a stick along a wrought iron fence to make a rhythm, a black cat asleep in the spill of sun on a stoop. "They make you pay a room tax here," he said matter-of-factly, "but they give you sky to make up for it." We talked in non-dangerous fragments, his grandmother's lemon cookies, my habit of photographing doorways, the way everyone in Phoenix thinks they want summer until summer actually arrives. He did not ask about Caleb. I did not bring Caleb up. The choice felt like a door left closed on purpose. By late afternoon, the new e-ticket landed in my inbox with the weight of a key dropped into my palm. I forwarded it to myself, to 3 other email addresses I used, and to my mother, whose phone I knew would ping on her kitchen table in a sunny Arizona kitchen. I did not send it to Caleb. Let him live with the uncertainty he had engineered for me. Now Marco said you will do nothing difficult for the next few hours. That is a rule. We followed his rule with precision. I returned to my room, showered, lay on top of the covers and stared at the whir of the ceiling fan like it was a documentary about a planet whose weather I was learning. When I woke, the sky had shifted into evening, a blue that films try and fail to duplicate. I met Marco outside, and we walked without agenda. We did not cross the river. We did not chase any must-sees. We gave ourselves permission to be ordinary in a place people save for. At dinner, in a corner, where the draft made the candle shiver, he asked the first question whose answer would bruise. "What will you do when you go home?" "I don't know." I said which was true and not true. I knew I would not pretend this was a joke. I knew that if I stayed, something inside me would learn a trick, and never unlearn it, a way of making myself small enough to fit into whatever shape someone else found convenient. "I'll start by not lying to myself about what it was." "Good start," he said softly. Caleb called again while I was paying an insistence that felt like a hand on my shoulder I hadn't invited. I silenced the phone without looking at the screen. The choice didn't feel defiant. It felt correct. Back at the hotel, Benedetti slid 2 envelopes across the counter, one with printed copies of my new itinerary, one with directions to the consulate should I need to return. "For your folder," she said. "People cope better when their documents behave." "My documents behave," I said, and we both smiled at the oddness of a sentence that swelled with comfort anyway. Upstairs, I wrote in my notebook as if it were a witness that might someday be called times, names, numbers, what people said, what they didn't. I tried out a sentence in my head. "When someone shows you how little your fear matters to them, believe them." It didn't fit on 1 line, so I let it spill to 2. I set my alarm for 9. Marco had promised to meet me then, portfolio in hand, to push on the last administrative knots and make sure there were no hidden traps in the route home. I turned my phone to airplane mode again and slid it beneath a book instead of under my pillow. The room seemed to expand by an inch. I slept, and when I dreamed I was walking down a street where all the doors were painted different colors. I carried a key that fit none of them, and this did not frighten me. It only meant I hadn't reached mine yet. Morning arrived like a clean page. Light lifted itself along the ceiling and pooled on the wardrobe. The fan hummed the same soft thesis about air and motion. I showered, braided my hair, and met Marco at 9 as promised. He had a slim portfolio under his arm, and the look of a person who believes in checklists. "First, the boring things," he said as we took a table near the lobby windows. Boring things keep the exciting things from becoming disasters. We went line by line. He had me forward the e-ticket to a secondary email and to the hotel printer. He called the airline to confirm the booking had no hidden booby traps, no surprise layovers, no fare codes that gag on seat changes. He pushed gently but relentlessly for a seat assignment that would not strand me between a bathroom door and a toddler. He double-checked baggage rules and added a note to the record about passenger well-being, the sort of phrase that seems like PR until you need it. He suggested a second route via Madrid as a fail-safe and wrote the details in my notebook boxy and neat. "Security," I asked. "Arrive early," he said. "Smile like you know where you are going even if you do not, and put your documents in the same pocket every time." These were kindergarten rules for grown-up travel, and I felt my lungs loosen as if the building had opened a window just for me. When we finished the logistics, he tipped his portfolio against the chair and stood. "Now we do the opposite of boring." We walked away from the arterial streets and into the narrow lanes behind them where laundry flapped like flags and old women observed the world from second-floor windows as if it were a play written for them. Marco seemed to know everyone, the barista who slid a cornetto across the counter with a wink, the cobbler bent over a heel, the woman in the tiny flower shop who tucked a sprig of rosemary into my hand for courage and shooed away my coins. At a bakery where the counter smelled like buttered mornings, we ate warm pastries over a standing bar and drank coffee that tasted like someone had taught the sun to speak. Marco told me about his nonna, who used to wake him at dawn to roll out pasta by hand and say, "You measure with your eyes and your fingers. Recipes are only maps." He said it in English and then again in Italian, and the second version sounded like a prayer. "You take this route with all your guests?" I asked. "With the ones who need to feel the city is smaller than it looks," he said. "And with the ones who need to remember they are larger than they think." He said it without the italics most men like to hear in their own wisdom. It landed anyway. My phone buzzed once in my bag airplane mode off for the admin calls, then back on, and I didn't reach for it. The restraint felt like a new skill. We crossed a small square where children chased pigeons who tolerated the game as if paid by the hour. A cat slept in a sunlit wedge on a doorstep untroubled by anything. A seamstress in a workshop the size of a pantry leaned toward a dress and pinned time into the fabric. Tourists come looking for the postcard, Marco said, and the city gives it. But the other version, the one you only see after 3 days of being lost, that is the one I like. Which version am I seeing now? The one that moves at the speed of kindness, he said. Not slower, just the right speed. At noon, we sat on a low wall by the Arno and ate sandwiches wrapped in paper that crinkled like polite applause. I told him about Phoenix summers that melt lipstick in 6 steps, and about my mother's habit of mailing me clippings about stolen garden gnomes. He told me about an uncle who owned a minuscule hotel near Siena, the dream to renovate it, and the brutal arithmetic of loans. We talked about good bread and bad coffee, about the urge to take photos of doors, about the way some days feel like a hallway of closed ones. He did not ask about Caleb. I did not talk about Caleb. That silence precisely shaped protected the day like glass protects a flame. At 10 o'clock, when the church bells counted it out in bronze, I took a slow breath and did the thing I had been measuring all morning. I turned my phone on, typed a single line, and hit send. Thanks for arranging this, babe. Marco's been incredible. Then I switched the phone off again, slid it back into my bag, and looked up at the river as if it were reading my mind. The message was not a lie. It was also not a confession. It was a mirror held up to a man who enjoyed mirrors only when they flattered him. We climbed to the San Miniato terrace in the late afternoon, the kind of uphill that makes conversation break into punctuation. The city spread below like a map someone had drawn with a soft pencil. A choir rehearsed inside the church. The notes spilled out and dissolved in the air, disciplined and tender. I sat on the stone wall and let the breeze unspool my thoughts. I had told myself for 3 years that I was reasonable, that compromise was the service charge on companionship. I had forgiven jokes that were not jokes, because that was the closest thing to apology I could harvest from them. I had upholstered small unkindnesses with context. Watching Florence breathe, I understood, like seeing a color correctly for the first time, that respect isn't a luxury a partner earns. It's the price of admission. Your face changed, Marco said, sitting down beside me. I think I finally named something, I said. Once you name it, it stops hiding in the wallpaper. What is its name? Meanness dressed as humor, I said. Control disguised as concern. And the part of me that signed for the package every time it arrived. You are not the courier, he said, mild and certain. We walked back through a different set of streets, so the buildings would surprise us from new angles. A boy practiced scales on a trumpet in a third-floor window. The notes wobbled and then found their center. A woman watered geraniums on a balcony and waved as if we were characters she recognized from a previous chapter. We met Benedetti briefly, so I could leave a copy of my itinerary in the hotel safe. She glanced at the single line of text on my phone's outbox it had sent clean and complete, and lifted one eyebrow. I shrugged, and she smiled the way a person smiles when a student finally answers her own question. By early evening, I let the phone live again. It woke up furious. Dozens of messages unspooled in fast sequence. Where are you? Call me now. Why would you text me that? Who is Marco? This isn't funny. Answer the phone. Elena, I swear to God. I scrolled without tapping any, noting the weather of the thread. There was no, are you safe? There was no, I'm sorry. There was a barometric pressure of injury, his, not mine. He sounded like a man whose carefully balanced story had slipped an inch and threatened to reveal the shelf beneath. I set the phone face down and walked out onto the street where the evening was setting the table for itself. Marco and I found a corner table in a trattoria with tile floors that remembered 1,000 dinners. The candle leaned into the draft. The glasses pinged when the waitress set them down. What happens when you land? He asked after the bread arrived, and the oil glowed green in the dish. I pack a bag and stay at my friend Lila's for a few nights, I said, surprising myself with a plan that felt both new and already true. I call my mother, and I call a lawyer. I gather the receipts literal and figurative. And with him, he asked, not saying Caleb's name as if it were a spell best left unused. I think I will have exactly one conversation, I said, and I will not have it on a sidewalk or in our kitchen while he makes a sandwich. I'll have it when I'm sitting down with my shoes on with water within reach. This is very specific, he said, approving. I am very tired of improvising with a man who calls his cruelty clever, I said. Specific is my oxygen. We ate slowly, not because the food required reverence, though it did, but because talking felt kinder at that speed. When I laughed, it did not feel like a negotiation. When I was quiet, it did not feel like a test. After dinner, we walked nowhere in particular. The city taking on its nightly costume of golden windows and echoed footsteps. A violinist tried out a romantic cliché and earned it. Marco told me about a school trip he took as a boy to Rome when he got separated from his group, and a shopkeeper made him sit drink water and wait no drama, just an assumption that a child will be found. It is the first time I understood what safety looked like, he said. Not big gestures, just someone deciding you are their problem for a little while. You have been that for me, I said. And he shook his head, not as false modesty, but like a person shooing away a fly. You did the hard parts, he said. You said the sentences that made the room change. Back in my room, I opened my notebook and drew a small square for tomorrow Wakepack Consulate, if needed, check out airport. Underneath, I wrote a question without a question mark. What is the smallest life I am willing to accept? Then another line. What is the truest one I can stand to build? The phone pulsed again. I let it. I brushed my teeth. I folded the clothes I would wear, dark jeans, a soft sweater shoes that understood security lines. I set my passport in the outside pocket of my bag and zipped it with a clean click of a decision. At 10, I turned on the phone long enough to read the latest messages. They had edged from panic into command and back into panic. Call me right now. You don't get to do this. If you don't answer, I'm calling the consulate. The story was collapsing in his hands. I typed a reply I did not send. You don't get to narrate my fear. I deleted it. He didn't need the line, and I didn't need the argument. Instead, I placed the phone on the desk screen down and sat on the edge of the bed. The room held very still, as if waiting for a cue. I could feel part 4 assembling itself like a stage set, the props in their places, the lights testing their fades. The call would come, and I would pick it up, and I would not mistake volume for truth. Outside, a scooter coughed and receded. Footsteps passed and blurred. Somewhere, someone laughed, the hopeful kind, the end of day kind. I breathed in, breathed out, and did not flinch from the fact that tomorrow I would be airborne, and soon after that, I would be free in ways I had not yet imagined. The call arrived between toothbrush and shoes. I watched the screen light the nightstand like a small stage and let it ring twice before I answered. Elena! Caleb's voice came in hot, rehearsed for authority and cracking on the high notes. What was that text? Who is Marco? You don't get to. I'm going to stop you there, I said, sitting in the chair by the window so my back could learn what a straight line felt like. You changed my flights without my consent, canceled my return, and left me in another country. That wasn't a joke. It was abandonment. You're being dramatic. I already told you. You told me you engineered it and laughed about my face, I said. You needed me scared so you could feel clever. I'm not debating definitions with you. Here's what's next. I'm flying home today. I'm not going to the apartment. I'll collect my documents with a friend present. After that, you'll hear from an attorney. Keep all communications in writing. He breathed like a man who'd started running and discovered the ground moved under him. You're not blowing up our marriage over this. I'm not blowing it up, I said. I'm acknowledging it's already in pieces. So you're leaving me for some Italian tour guide. I'm choosing not to live with contempt, I said. The rest is none of your business. He pivoted to bargaining, then to fury, then to a last-ditch tenderness so sugary my teeth hurt. I didn't follow him through any of those doors. When he realized I wasn't moving, he tried one more time to sound like the man in charge. If you walk out, that's on you. I already walked out, I said, and ended the call. The city was still blue with morning when Marco met me in the lobby, portfolio under his arm and a small paper bag in his hand. For the airport, he said. And when I opened it, there were 2 almond cookies and a note with directions written as if the route itself needed encouragement. Through security, gate on the left, coffee to the right if the line is kind. We practiced this, he said lightly. Same pocket for documents, same breath for hard moments. I did the call, I said. He nodded once, receiving the information like a nurse receives a temperature quietly useful for the chart. How do you feel? Like a door closed, I said. And like there's air where a wall used to be. He walked me to the taxi, not touching me except with his steadiness, which somehow touched everything. At the curb, he said, "Remember, no speeches to people who don't believe weather exists. Pack for the life you are actually living." The driver pulled away. In the mirror, Marco lifted 2 fingers in a small salute, and then the corner took him. At the airport, the rituals worked exactly as designed: belts off trays, carry on, show your liquids as a personality test. At the gate, I ate 1 cookie and put the other in my bag. I didn't open my phone. On the plane, Florence fell away Doms River, a pattern I knew I would see again, even with my eyes closed. I wrote in my notebook until the words smoothed out, then I slept. Phoenix met me with a heat that flattened conversations. Lila was waiting at arrivals in sandals and an expression I had loved since college because it always said the same thing. "Okay then. We will do the next thing." We did the next things. We drove past the apartment and did not slow down. We went to the bank. I opened a separate account, changed every login I had ever lazily shared, put holds where holds could go. We sat at her dining table with iced tea and drafted a timeline while the dog put his head on my knee whenever my voice thinned. I emailed a family lawyer whose bio did not read like a boast and attached copies of everything. Airline confirmations, cancellation notice with passenger request in black type, my notes from the consulate. Caleb texted again, skipping like a rock across denial into rage and back. "Come home and we can talk. You're humiliating me. People are asking questions." Not once did he ask how I had gotten through the week. Not once did he write the sentence I had needed on the first morning: "I'm sorry." "Are you safe?" The lawyer replied faster than I expected. "Consult tomorrow, 10 a.m. She asked me to bring proof of the cancellation. I printed the email and highlighted the line that mattered. She asked about finances. I wrote down what I knew and circled the places that lived behind his passwords. She asked if there had been other patterns. I wrote jokes that left bruises, moving targets for what supportive meant apologies that never learned to walk. That afternoon, the story started circulating anyway. A friend texted, "Did he really leave you in Italy?" I didn't answer. That evening, one of Caleb's co-workers, someone I had met at a forgettable holiday party, sent me a screenshot of a group chat where he'd bragged about the experiment and how I totally freaked. The co-worker added exactly 6 words. "You don't deserve any of this." I forwarded the screenshot to the lawyer. She wrote back, "Keep everything. Don't respond." Caleb tried a few last angles, love bombing logistics, the theater of remorse. His manager called Lila's landline. How he got it, I don't know, and left a message about concern for team morale. I did not call back. My attorney sent a letter that began with, "Please direct all communication to my office," and included a list of the documents we would be requesting. It felt reading it like watching the scaffolding of a house go up in clean sections. The conversation I promised one seated shoes on water within reach did happen. It was short. I didn't narrate my pain or try to educate him. I named legal steps and logistical boundaries. He tried to make the air swim. I let it be air. When I left the cafe where we met, I walked to my car and had the peculiar sensation of my bones fitting where they lived. At the stoplight, I realized I was hungry, and that hunger didn't feel like a problem to solve about anyone else. The divorce moved at the speed of paper, which is to say slower than fury and faster than regret. The judge did not care for storytelling. She cared about exhibits. The airline emails and the chat screenshots and the call logs did their quiet work. There were no heroic speeches, no gavel theatrics. There was a ruling, and then there was a morning after the ruling which I spent making eggs in Lila's kitchen and not crying. Caleb's consequences found him without my help. The brag reached the wrong ears, and then the right ones. He learned the difference between being thought clever and being known. None of that belonged to me. My jurisdiction was my life, my keys, the sound, my own shoes made on my own floor. I went back to work. I bought a second-hand dresser and painted it the color of a calm sky. I called my mother on Sundays and told her true things. I returned the apartment keys I didn't need. When I missed what I thought I had, I reminded myself it was the outline of safety, not the thing itself. 6 months later, a postcard arrived at Lila's, an apology for not being an email. A photograph on the front showed a tiny inn near Siena, white shutters open, like someone saying, "Come in." On the back, Marco had written, The uncle's place survived the accountant. We're reopening for the spring. If you ever want a season of learning how to argue with plumbers in Italian, there's a room with your name on it. P.S. Your cookie is still in my desk. I booked a ticket, not running away from Phoenix, not running toward anything I hadn't already decided. Just a season, a try. When I arrived, the air smelled like rosemary and wet stone, and the lobby had a desk scarred with the history of other people's check-ins. Marco showed me the calendar full of pencil marks and the yard that needed a bench. He handed me a set of keys attached to a wooden tag someone had carved decades ago. La Porticina, the little door. We didn't name anything too soon. We mended chairs and made lists and learned that the washer likes to sulk unless you encourage it in Italian. On days off, we drove without a map and took pictures of doors. Some evenings, we stood at the edge of the property and counted bats. Some mornings, we looked at the bookings like weather and celebrated small forecasts. One night, after guests had gone to bed and the kitchen smelled like lemon and steam, Marco asked, "Do you ever wish it turned out different?" "I wish I had believed myself sooner," I said. "But if I had, I wouldn't be here and here fits." He nodded, as if I'd answered a question the house had asked. Outside, crickets stitched the yard together. I thought of all the rooms I had tried to make myself smaller, for all the thresholds I had crossed, because the person on the other side promised a better story if I swallowed the one I was living. Respect, it turned out, wasn't a perk. It was the price of admission. Once I paid it to myself, other doors started opening with ordinary clicks. I went to bed that night with the window open, the air moving, like proof the keys on the nightstand where I could see them evidence that the next morning and the next, I got to choose which one fit. Thank you so much for listening to today's story. If this story resonated with you or made you reflect, I'd love to hear your thoughts, so feel free to share them in the comments below. And don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell so you won't miss the next story. I'll see you next time, as we continue exploring more journeys and lessons together.